I'd just like to ask my colleagues if they have further questions for you, perhaps about specific works that you may oversee.
Well, my first question is going to be not about a specific work, but I just think it's so brave as a young Japanese woman to go to New York City having just exchanged correspondence with someone and never having been there before. Can you talk a little bit more about what it was like when you arrived? Was it what you expected, and where you found an apartment? You said Mitsunis was helping you look for a job. Did you have like a day job or a part-time job, and what your daily life was like when you came?
Okay. Anyway, we had to support ourselves by working, getting some job. But actually it was illegal for just a visitor to find a steady job. Mm-hmm. But I knew lots of Japanese visitors helping or sharing the job with American. And George found me the ideal jobs for me. He asked, the Joe Jones. Joe Jones was a musician, and he used to type. He had the music typewriter, and at that time there was no computer, and the clean score was typed up from the dirty manuscript. And he had working on that job, and George asked him to share with that job with me, and Joe Jones kindly agreed with his proposal and let me share his job. So I sometimes worked on typing a music score and get some amount of money from the boss, from that company's boss. And it was just enough to support myself. I spent some hours working on the music type. And I am very grateful. For the first few weeks, Shigeko and I worked in the Japanese restaurant. But I didn't like to work on that type of job. And I was so grateful for Joe Jones and George Matsunas.
And were the two of you, did you and Shigeko live together in an apartment? Were you,
yes,
you came over together and you were staying?
For a while, but it was so good to live in the same room. I thought it was separate. It had 2 rooms, but actually it was only one. So I found another place to live and moved out.
I think I have a couple of questions. I mean, it's not quite formed yet, but you mentioned that at the origin of the group Ongaku is the experience you had, this occasion where you played a part in Schoenberg's Lunaire,
yes.
Which is interesting because that's also one of the last pieces, I believe, that Jiken Kobo, the experimental workshop, got together and presented on stage. So that sort of makes me, the group Jiken Kobo.
No. The Jiken Kobo is belongs to the upper generation.
Right. But one of their last performances, I think, was that piece also, Schoenberg's Pure Lunaire.
Oh, really?
Yes, and then
I didn't know that.
That was presented on the stage. So they got together in 1951
Oh, really?
Right, to do a piece. I can't remember what piece that was on the occasion of a Picasso exhibition.
I see.
That was the first time that they got together, and I think the last event they did that was actually earlier than 60. It was 1958, I think, and then they staged
Oh,
this
really?
piece.
We didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's a quite interesting connection.
Yes,
Although, you know,
so-
they're much earlier generation, just a few years after. You said
Yes.
63. That,
No,
you know,
no, it's not 63.
Oh.
We performed Piero Lunaire in the school the university festival.
Yes.
It was 1959.
59.
59.
Yeah. So right around the same time. Was that a really important piece? That particular piece by Schoenberg?
Yes, I don't know why, but the people loves Piero Lunaire.
Yeah.
And actually, Piero lured me to do some improvised music and other thing. So it was one of my start of my experience.
It's a very nice connection with the
Well, that's
the kind of goes
yes,
through
that's
the
right.
different
That's right.
generations. I've also always had this impression that while Japanese participation and contribution to Fluxus is so critical and it plays a huge part in right at the beginning of Fluxus, and Machunas also recognized those artists who weren't officially part of Fluxus, such as High Red Center. But I also had this impression that, other than you remotely working with Fluxus artists through Spatial Poems or other project, that there wasn't that much exposure to Fluxus within Japan, other than just a few examples, such as I think you did an event when you first returned at Crystal Gallery.
Yes, that's
that
right.
was
Yes.
65,
60,
66.
65.
Right.
Yes, at the Crystal Gallery.
And then after that, you also did the Fluxus bus tour with I.O.
Yes, that's right.
Which I think we have actually the tape recording of
Yes.
in our collection. But other than that, it seems like there wasn't that much back and forth, other than yourself and I.O. perhaps, until more recent interests in the history of
Yes.
Fluxus. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, Mr. Akiyama was a conductor of the Fluxus Orchestra concert at Carnegie Hall. He and Toshiichi Yanagi, who spent a lot of his days in New York and knew about Fluxus, organized Flux Week just 2 months after I came back to Japan, and we had the performances. But not many people in Japan showed interest in Fluxus, and except for some students in university, they wanted to pick up the Fluxus as a subject for graduation thesis. But the interest to Fluxus was not much going on, and but I kept doing Fluxus thing through the communication with the people of Fluxus, and it was just local in here.
In your house.
in my house, in my house.
And all over the world.
Yes, I felt like I'm living in the house, but at the same time, I am living in the world, on the stage of the earth, which is my concept of a special poem.
Yeah.
I still kept living in the concept of a special poem. The earth is one, and people can communicate each other. Especially these days, can communicate by internet or many things. So the earth is becoming smaller and smaller. I hope it not shrink as a black hole.